Hi, I'm Dan Litster. Today, I'm joined by Paul Armstrong and Nick Deninno. And now, let's talk textiles. Welcome, everyone, to Talking Textiles. I'm Dan Litster. The goal of this podcast is to get to know the wide variety of positions and markets that make the advanced textile world turn. We will be talking to professionals in different roles throughout this series to help inspire the next generation of textile professionals and anyone interested in learning about others' journey in the world of textiles. ATA offers advanced textiles content throughout the year, including the upcoming Advanced Textiles Expo 2025, taking place this November 4th through 7th in Indianapolis, Indiana. See the latest innovations from top companies in the textile industries and participate in educational sessions taught by experts. Visit textiles.org/events to learn more. Today we are talking about codes and standards. Our featured guests are Nick Deninno, who's the owner of Block and Roll Innovations and chairman of Tent Rental Division, and Paul Armstrong, who's the principal of PACCS and code consultant for ATA. Welcome to the podcast. Well, let's start with Paul. Paul, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, role, company, all of that kind of good information.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Dan. Well, my background, I've been around for a little while now, but I am in the building code, if you will, development business. I have been working either enforcing building codes or consulting on how building codes should be revised, perhaps, that kind of a thing for over 30 years now. Started with the city of Los Angeles and then went to the group that the International Code Council that actually produces the model building codes for the United States. And so I've been doing that for a long time. And what keeps me in the business is that I've met so many great people that to leave would be to never see them again. So that'd be a problem.
Great. And Nick, kind of same question for you. Tell us a little about your background, role, company, all that kind of great information.
Sure. I started in the tent industry back in just prior to 90, just prior to 2000, actually. I bought my first tent in 2000, but started a rental business about a year before that. And quickly got into tents and expanded, bought a smaller company, and quickly got into ballasting, which of course got me interested in codes and all kinds of things because we had a lot to deal with working in New York City, where most of our work was, and that ran for about 20 some odd years, to almost 25 years. I recently sold, but about 12 years ago, I started Block and Roll, which was the tent ballast system for the tent industry, and I've been doing that now since I sold in 2020, and that's my full-time gig now.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Start with some questions for Paul. Paul, we often hear members say, I don't deal with codes. Why is it essential for companies, especially in our industry, to understand codes and standards?
Oh my. Well, I hear that a lot. It's not just from our industry here, but from all over. And really there's three reasons. Certainly for one, in most areas, if not virtually all areas of the United States, it's the law. It makes really sense that we would have something like that to really level the playing field for everybody out there. And that's part of having the law in place so that, that people in the industry can understand what the standards are and how to comply with them. Two, I mean, there's a satisfaction of knowing that you're providing a safe, industry supported type of installation that will certainly be great for whatever event, whatever party, that kind of a thing is going on. And three, and in some ways, certainly for the installers that are out there, liability is huge. And if there is a problem, and I've been involved with some of these types of situations, and the suits show up with the extra long, pads of paper. That's the old way of looking at it. They're going to ask, one of their first questions will be to ask, whether or not you have permits to install and whether everything was inspected. And if you don't, they're not going to back you up. So there really is a threefold thing, I think, that really does help certainly the industry in a lot of ways. I understand that it's time consuming and sometimes it's kind of a pain, but we all deal with it. And once you understand it, then it makes things much better for everybody involved.
Oh, great answer. So, I know the ICC code hearings are coming up. So, can you share with us some insights about what's going to be upcoming there at those hearings, and what topics specifically will you be addressing?
Well, the second code action hearings for what's called Group B, that includes the structural provisions in terms of proposals for revising the building code from a structural manner, are coming up in Cleveland, Ohio at the end of October here. There is more work being done on certainly applying, I think, a more reasonable set of loads to these temporary structures, tents, things of that nature, of course, that don't need to be, those tents don't need to necessarily comply with the more permanent types of structures that are going to be up for 50 years or more. And so the American Society of Civil Engineers has a subgroup that has been putting together a proposal and working actually over the last couple of cycles to get something in there that does more reasonably represent what kinds of loads these installations should be expected to meet. Now, with that, the healthcare industry, obviously, after coming out of the COVID pandemic, is very, very interested in everything related to tents and other kinds of temporary structures. And they're actually coming in and saying, hey, we need a little more flexibility than what even ASCE, the engineers, have put together. And so we've been working together with them quite a bit. And lastly, there is a concern from the floodplain managers in the United States about installations in identified flood areas. And they initially started out with an outright ban for the installs, which does not make sense and would not work. But they've since revised their proposals to be one that says that if there is an identified flood coming into a given area and there's installs, perhaps there's some other things that you need to do, maybe take down the tent. You want to protect your product, of course, or provide some kinds of means of mitigating any sort of hazards related to the flood. So there's a number of things going on along those lines. And then one last thing, in the spring of 2026, we have what is called the final action hearing. And that's where the ICC membership votes on all the code changes from Group A and Group B. And Group A includes our fire resistance types of concerns too. And so we'll be in Hartford, Connecticut for that in the spring and maybe discussing these. We don't know yet what the agenda is for that, but that's it in a nutshell.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
It is.
For our ATA membership, for those encountering code-related challenges, what's some practical advice you can offer them?
The first thing, and it really is a more proactive approach, is get to know the building and fire code officials in your area, get to understand what their issues and concerns are. For one, they have to enforce, they have to work with a large amount of technical information, and nobody knows everything. And so if you can go to their association meetings of various types, and you can even provide education on the various aspects of tent installations or what have you. Now, moving on to the little more practical advice for when you're dealing with a project that has a concern is get together with the fire code or building code official if you have, any type of design professional, whether it's an architect or an engineer involved, have them meet with them and come up with a way to mitigate their concerns. Most fire and building code officials are looking to kind of facilitate the installation. And as such, they're looking for solutions. So educating yourself, understanding what can be done out there, I think is going to be huge. The last thing, if push comes to shove, you can hire certainly your own code consultants to come in alongside and provide reports for how your particular installation would certainly satisfy their concerns from whatever aspect they're dealing with, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Good advice. So I've seen this firsthand, but you have a well-known passion for codes. What drives that interest?
That is actually a very good question in a lot of ways. But for one, great mentors. I had a lot of people that, again, were very passionate about it. The main thing that drives certainly my interest and my passion in this area is just the satisfaction of knowing that you're really helping out people all over the United States and frankly, even the world, because our codes and standards are used by different groups out there, maybe not the country, but certainly the large manufacturers, the large companies, the hotel chains that are used to our codes are taking those across, the entire globe and applying those there. And so then you're providing safety for all kinds of people everywhere. The only challenge that we have is, or that I have, or my family has, maybe that's a better way of putting it, is that I walk into an existing building and all of a sudden I'm looking up at all the fire protection features or checking to see if any exit doors are blocked or things like that. And they understand what that means because now we have about 3 or 4 of them in the business too. It's a great business. They're great people, as I mentioned earlier, and dear friends. And it makes it a lot of fun also to participate with them.
Well, great answer, and certainly we appreciate all you do for ATA and our members. So thank you. Let's get Nick in here, and we'll grill Nick with some questions now. What are some of the common code issues that tent rental companies typically face, Nick?
I mean, I think the biggest issue that tent rental companies have is what Paul said. They don't have any relationship with the code officials, and they're terrified of code officials. And often they leave it to chance and say, well, hopefully we'll get through this inspection right. So I think that the best thing they can do is really take the bull by the horns and meet with the code officials, understand their needs, because I don't think Paul mentioned before is, all these codes are great and there's so many of them, and but they're all subject to interpretation. So one inspector may interpret a code one way, while the same code might be interpreted by another inspector a different way. So knowing your inspectors and your jurisdiction that you're putting up tents in is going to take away a lot of the stress because you know exactly what they're looking for and how to achieve what they're looking for. And we need that. I'm from a tent guy, right? I've been a tent guy for a lot of years. I was that guy, very fearful of code inspectors in the very beginning. I was very, very fearful. I didn't know what to do. I was nervous at these inspections until I started having the conversations. And once the conversations started, it eased everything. And now they knew what we were looking for. And I got to a point in my career where about a few years ago, before I sold the company, I had to call one of the fire marshals and say, you guys are not coming to our inspections anymore to inspect our tents anymore. Why? And he said, oh, we've been to enough of your company's inspections that we know you're doing it right. We're focusing on time to other companies that need the help and we need to supervise. So that was a good feeling to know that, not that they wouldn't come again, but they said, we're prioritizing other people over you because we've been to your inspections and we feel good that your company is doing it right. So those are the goals. That's what every company's goal should be, is to get to that point. And it only got there by good relationship with the code officials.
Nick, are there any misconceptions that code officials often have about tents or temporary structures?
Yes, I do. And I think the biggest thing is most of the code inspectors, to my knowledge, across the country fall under fire marshal. While there are some odd divisions that do code inspections, and like New York City used to have the elevator inspectors do tent inspections, for a while. So, but for the most part, they're fire marshals, and fire marshals come in and have one concern and one concern only. Is this is this going to burn if there's a fire? And that's great. And that's a great concern. But 99.9% of the commercial tents manufactured in the last 20 years are meet the flame retardancy and are good. Sometimes the bigger concern that they do not look at is that tent installed properly? Is it anchored properly? Because those could be the bigger risks to the guests or attendees at an event rather than a fire. While a fire is serious, most of our tents are flame retardant and do hold up well if there's a fire. The stuff underneath's a different story, but so I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is a lot of it is solely on fire code and not on actual, is that tent going to fly away if a big wind comes? And I think that's a big concern that we need to address as ATA.
No, thanks. That was informative. Can you explain what an AHJ is and why the tent rental division is featuring a session about this at the Tent Expo?
Yes. So AHJ, alphabet soup here, right, is authority having jurisdiction. I believe I got that right. So it could be whoever in your jurisdiction has the authority to inspect or set the rules or enforce the codes. And it's different in every jurisdiction. That's why it's a good term. It's a good term to understand and learn. And ATA has been very involved with code officials and working with fire marshals and code officials. And we did a first comprehensive seminar to fire marshals, code officials, a few years back in California. And it was a very successful program. We had about 25 or 30 of different jurisdictions in California come to this event. And the takeaway was incredible because we had these code officials coming to us, first of all, very interested in the content, asked a lot of questions, were relieved that we educated them on the different types of tents and how they work and how they're anchored and what to look for. And not only was the session a big success, the follow-up that came from it, of them reaching out to us over the next few months, actually up to 2 weeks ago, I got a call from one of the fire marshals that attended that particular session, clarifying and asking different questions. Oh, I've had this situation and I don't see it in our, ever going over it. What is the proper procedure? And, most of the time it goes back to manufacturers, installation processes and different things like that. But they were very, very intrigued to learn about our industry and the things we can do or things we do to keep guests safe and to keep the event safe. And that they didn't even realize we were doing, or they didn't even realize that that's something I should look at and I should inspect. So ATA has been very proactive. We have a huge session coming up at our Tent Expo in January in Kissimmee, Florida, January 27th to the 29th. I might as well get a little plug in there. And we have a full day of AHJ education. And we hope to have people from all over the country come. And what's great about doing it at Tent Expo is there's actual product up for us to show the AHJs around and the code inspectors and show them the actual different types of tents, the features on the tents, how they're anchored, what to inspect for, how to look at straps, to all the different safety things that go into putting up a tent and installing a tent. So that's going to be a great session. We're getting some good traction with it so far, and we think we're going to have a good turnout for that. And it's really to make the industry better, to make the industry safer, and to make it easier for tent installation companies to reach out to those AHJs and start the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you kind of covered a lot of this already, but my next question here that I have is, what are attendees going to gain from attending that AHJ session at Tent Expo?
So I think the biggest part is a great insight into the tent industry and safe tent installations. Again, a lot of them, they think they know tents and they don't pretend that they know everything about a tent, And I could tell you a quick funny story. First, years ago, 2005 or six, structure. I put up my first one of my first structures in this county, and a structure tent does not have any guidelines. And I had the code inspector came and said, you can't put this tent up like this. You have to have guidelines. I said, well, the tent is not engineered for guidelines. It doesn't need it. And it was just clearly an education thing. And by the end of the day, and a 165-page document that I handed him to prove it, now he understood this is a different style tent. So I think the goal, one of the big takeaways is they will learn the different style tents and what is required to put them up safely, how to anchor them or ballast them. We also focus on their concerns. So we have a whole portion of the seminar that we dedicate to letting them tell us what their issues are when they go to tent installations. And funny, one of our last sessions we did in Missouri, the couple of the code officials said, our problem is we're told to come in. The event is Saturday. We're coming in Saturday to inspect the tent, and we find a problem, and there's no time for anybody to fix it. We want to come in earlier, so we got that information out of them, and now we'll go to our membership and say, hey, have your code officials come in a day or two before. They don't want to be there the morning of. They don't want to be there and tell you this is wrong and you have no time to fix it before Mr. and Mrs. Smith are coming down the aisle at the wedding. So I think that was a big thing that we got from them, their feedback, and there was a bunch of other issues that they did tell us that they didn't understand, and our goal is to just work in unison and understand each other. And I think one of our big things that we took out of it was go to our membership and tell them, go have coffee with a code official. Go find your code official, say, hey, on a Tuesday morning, can we grab a cup of coffee and just talk about our upcoming events or your needs, your requirements, and make sure we're all on the same page. And I think they want to do that. As long as they can accommodate the time, they want to meet and have that information in advance.
That's great advice. Really great advice. Well, on a personal note, what do you get out of attending Tent Expo?
Well, for me, I mean, when I was a tent operator, Tent Expo was phenomenal because I got to see the product firsthand, and I always used to joke and say, we're not making purchases at Tent Expo often. We'd go there and we're not ready to buy, but I learned what was available, how it worked, how it was different from what I had in my inventory. And when I was ready, when that job came up 2 months later, 3 months later, a year later, I'm like, you know what? I saw the perfect structure or tent at Tent Expo that's going to work. And I knew I was ready to pull the trigger. I didn't have to go ask all the questions and go try to see it somewhere. So I think for me in the beginning, it was an excellent opportunity to really understand the product, understand how it goes up. Being there for the installation with the manufacturers is priceless because you're actually, and this is all pre-show stuff, not even before, that's before the show starts. You get in there and you can get your hands dirty if you want. You don't have to, but you can witness the structures go up and understand how, if you've never put up that type of a structure or a tent, you can understand how to do it, what the process is, how to do it safely, and understand if it might be right for your industry. Just because the tent might be right for your events doesn't mean it's right for you if you can't handle the machinery or whatever's needed to put up that type or transportation. So it's good to learn all that ahead of time. And I would say my other favorite thing is, which is paramount, is the networking opportunity. I've met so many people who've saved the day for me countless times, and hopefully I've saved their day a few times too in helping out or giving advice and different things like that. So those are great takeaways from Tent Expo.
Great takeaways and a terrific plug. Thank you.
We want to know and we want to help. We can go into your jurisdiction and set up with the code officials to do a local seminar. We also, another takeaway that we should tell people is all the AHJs and code officials that service the tent industry can have a free membership with the TRD. And they just have to contact us and we will give them access to TRD membership and all of our ballast studies and staking documents and procedural handbooks. And that's been very helpful for them, for code officials, that they can really see and look up in real time. If they want to check a tent that somebody submitted and make sure it has enough weight on it, they can do that through the ballast study. And that's been a very helpful tool for them.
That's great. And I think the last thing that I'd like to emphasize for anybody listening to this podcast and all of that is that I hope that you've been able to tell that the industry, the enforcement community, the everybody involved really wants to have a safe installation. We're all driving that way. The industry is there to provide the assistance, as Nick just said. and our fire officials and some building code officials also that get involved really do want to work together to make sure that everything is safe and relatively sane for everybody involved.
So years ago, I was doing a very large, very expensive wedding for some very prominent people and very high value clients. And we're doing the setup, and we're almost done, and it's the day of the event, and the florals are being moved in. And I want to say floral budget was probably $250,000, if you could imagine what these floral centerpieces look like, pieces. And the code inspector, which is fire marshal, comes walking through, and he says, looks at the flowers that are being placed on these tables, and looks at me and says, well, that's a fire combustion hazard. They can't be here. And I laughed. I thought he was joking. Okay, so note, don't laugh at fire inspectors. So I really thought he was joking, and he was not joking. He said, no, these flowers are combustible and cannot be inside the tent. And the moral of the story is we didn't know that ahead of time. The client spent, over $250,000 on these flowers. So what did we do? We sat with the code official and we said, listen, we understand your concerns. What can we do to get through your concerns and still keep these flowers on the table? And the answer was a few extra fire extinguishers and a fire guard that would be on duty the entire time the tent was occupied. So they are reasonable, even though he was giving us what I thought was an unreasonable request. They are reasonable when you give them options and you give them ways that we can both be safe and meet their requirement for their code. So, and again, my note on that, don't laugh because he didn't think it was funny when I was laughing.
A long time ago, I actually worked for the City of Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety. I know it's the biggest building department in the world. And they have a tendency, kind of like New York City, as Nick was saying, to have their own way of doing things. And they have a lot of amendments to the code. Well, I was actually assigned to the temporary types of installation reviews specifically because we had a ton of them. And we actually had a golf tournament. I don't want to say which one that came in. And like Nick said, at the last minute, decided to come in and pull permits. And so we actually had to go out to the site instead of working in our offices with, time on our hands to get through all of this. We actually had to go out to the site and inspect as these installations were going up. And it was an extra fee, but it was another solution to some of the challenges I think we have with that. The other thing that Nick brought up is that there are a lot of things that are actually out of your control. As Nick said, the floral arrangements, I had never heard that. I find that one very, very interesting, Nick. That was a great, great story. There's things that have to be a part of various events. And when there is pushback from the fire code official and all that, sitting down with them, as Nick said, and coming up with a solution, brilliant solution, by the way, additional fire extinguishers and a fire watch. I remember actually asking for that in other types of temporary tent installations in the past as well. And actually, it was our fire code officials who did that. But that really is the way to go, is to work to find a solution. And there are solutions out there that you can use. And that's one of the things that the experience of the industry members here that are very active, Nick, Dan, others, they can actually share with you some of those solutions as well as we start to experience new issues that come up with installations. There's new stuff all the time. So it really is a very interesting industry. Also, it's an educational industry where we get to certainly learn every single day. We're in the business, and then we can take that knowledge and turn it around, as Nick was saying, and then provide that to others, including those that enforce the code. So it really is, it's not something you just sit behind a desk, all day long with a monitor and crunch numbers. You get to deal with people, you get to have very interesting times, and every day is different.
I have one more add in, Dan. The TRD, along with the ATA code committee, specifically for TRD, we are one of the things one of the results we got out of meeting with the code officials is that they don't understand what we're doing up front. And so we decided, the code committee decided in TRD to put out a standardized set of documents that you can fill out and submit to the code officials. Now, every jurisdiction may have their own forms that they need, but we're going to put out soon. Kevin Vasquez is working on it, and some other gentlemen from the code committee, a set of documents that was all the questions that the code officials are going to ask or could ask, and you put the answers in. So you submit that with your documents, with your formal documents that they request, because they might be their own forms, and then you could submit your diagrams and submit these other information pages. And we think that's going to help a lot of code officials better understand exactly what's happening and not have to go back and forth 10 times. What are you doing for this? Where is this going? Is there propane for heat? Is there, do you have a fire guard or a fire watch, or how are you evacuating based on wind? A lot of those questions will be on this form and pre-answered and can be submitted. And, I guess our ultimate goal as the tent rental division is to, and I know it's a big ask, but our ultimate goal would be to eventually have some kind of a national or nationwide standardized tent permit application that jurisdictions would adopt. Because right now, when you file for a tent in most jurisdictions, you're filling out a building permit as if you're building a permanent structure. When you get asked by the code official, where are your fire sprinklers in your tent, it's because they're basing it off of a building code, a permanent structure. So not many, if any, have a specific tent application for a tent permit. And that's something that, it could be a 5-year plan, it could be a 30-year plan, but we would love to see ATA produce documents that we can, and with our work with the code officials throughout the country, try to get these documents implemented and help get these permits personalized to the tent and temporary structure industry rather than building skyscrapers.
That's really a great idea, Nick. In the environment that we have and the way codes are adopted legally in each state or by local jurisdictions, having a single permit application might be difficult, but I agree with that concept. I think that certainly installations, temporary structures need to be viewed differently. And because of the system that we have in place right now for permitting, it views them as more like, permanent buildings that are supposed to be up there for 50 years or more. And that is not the case. So
Correct.
Getting to the International Code Council, getting to some of these other associations and groups in particular, or just working on individual states that you find are important to your business. I think that's a really good idea, and educating them, coming up with that, if you will, draft kind of temporary installation, building permit, fire permit type of template is brilliant. So I would highly recommend that anybody listening reach out and start to work on that. Certainly with the TRD Code Committee, I think that's a great idea.
Paul, I did get shut down one time on a job site because we did not have fire sprinklers.
I have heard that one too. Not your particular install.
Yeah.
And we try to reach out and we try to educate, certainly, the fire code officials. So, the position of fire prevention inspector, that kind of position, is one that is within the fire code enforcement community, one that is usually a short stop in their progress as they grow within the fire department or whatever fire authority they have there. And there's a ton of education that's needed. And so, as you said, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that look at just the occupancy and the building code and say, well, this kind of occupancy and occupant load needs fire sprinklers, fire alarms. I mean, we even had, as part of one of those installs, I remember from back in the day, our fire department did actually require a fully charged fire hose along with the fire watch to be in place during the event as well. So that there's still a ton of education that's needed out there, but hopefully we're not getting that nearly as much, Nick.
I think we're chipping away at it, and we're in the right direction. We're definitely headed.
I agree.
So I think, and one last thing I would put to people who are listening to this podcast who may not be a member of ATA, join, because this is what we do. We're doing it for you, whether you're in awnings or temporary structures or tents. We are here working for you as an industry. And if you're not a member with us, please join us, whether it's the TRD or PAMA, or there's different divisions of ATA that all deal with codes. And if you're having issues with codes, or you can listening and saying, "Yeah, I think they're doing great work," come join us if you're not already a member.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of ATA Talking Textiles. ATA is a non-for-profit association representing the international specialty fabrics marketplace. Learn more about the events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.